Sweet. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. I'm curious, did anybody join the live stream via the circle event? Uh, Blake, I'm also jealous. Well, that's because I didn't really do a whole lot. This was all David. He's been hounding Cal Newport for about a year and a half, I think. And we were finally able to connect. And yeah, we interviewed him last week, I think. Cal Newport is easily the smartest guy I have ever met. So in addition to his books, he's a regular contributor to the New Yorker, and his New Yorker articles are really great. He writes them every couple of months, it seems. And during the conversation, we had like our list of topics, and I pick one just like off the wall that wasn't on the outline. Did talk to him ahead of time, like, hey, so you wrote about, or what do you think about this? And he's like, well, as I wrote in this article for the New Yorker in June of last year, here's the 3 points. You can just recall all this stuff. We did it. So it was we recorded on Zoom, and he's got like a video booth thing like set up. He's got his monitor that he's looking at and the SM7B in front of him, and he talks with his hands all the time. So I know he's not like banging on a keyboard looking stuff up. I mean, I guess it's possible people are feeding him things, but I didn't get that impression. He's like one of the most engaging people I've ever talked to, just like staring at you intently the whole time, like nodding, just I don't know, basic communication, but that like there's a certain level of emotional intelligence you need in order to do that effectively. And he was like by far the best of anybody I have ever met. Well, it's not entirely your fault. I've been off in my own little world too. I showed up for that interview that David arranged. Other than that, things have been nuts with the day job, and I'm doing another round of interviews now. So, I mean, I haven't been a very good friend lately, not just to you, but in general. My apologies. At least we get to hang out next week, right? Hmm. Joe just got real quiet. It sounds better on my end. Just make sure you're not clipping in your recording. Okay. Well, Carol says it's better, so I'm not sure what's going on there. I could turn Zoom audio off and listen on YouTube for a second, but actually, I'll let you do that because I got to pick my next book yet. Oh man, I ordered some good ones recently. Slight buzz on Joe, Martin says. Hmm. Peter Attia. I'm not sure how to say that name. Bro, what's the new book coming out, Blake? Well, he's got a specific one in mind. I just don't know what he's talking about. Not sure he heard it. Yeah. Do you know who that is? I have. It's the right way to say it. Okay, cool. You sound so outlive. Hmm. Interesting. Let's see. Let me see. When does that one come out? Or is it out? Ah, pre-order. March 28th. I mean, that's not outrageous. Science and Art of Longevity. This sounds like a Joe book, to be honest. You tend to pick well, no, you tend to pick the healthy ones. I tend to pick, I don't know, the creativity ones. Yes, systems. There you go. If you were to encapsulate me in a nutshell, it's probably systems. I don't know. You picked work the system though, I think, didn't you? Yeah. I don't know. There's lots of good ones, to be honest, that I have ordered recently. One of them is titled Surrounded by Idiots. I feel like that would be a fun one to read. No, I just like the title. Ah, oh my goodness. Can you all hear Joe? Carol says yes. Martin says yes. Well, this would be a great time to tell people that if you're a Bookworm Club premium member, you can get the bootleg version as soon as this is over, and you can listen to all this banter about technical difficulties again. Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. Good question. You see, they have Remarkable with the keyboard coming out. Yes, I did see that. I'm so firmly entrenched with the books that I'm not even tempted by that. But I think that is kind of cool. I have the keyboard case for the books. I never really use it because I don't just go somewhere to write with that device, but I could totally see myself doing that at some point. So I think there's a certain type of person that that's a great option for. However, at that point, it's no different than a laptop, and the thinness of the Remarkable really isn't, it is what it is. Yeah, exactly. But so um, I can't see any of since we moved to Circle, all the old recommendations. I don't think they made it over. Uh, Good question. I'm not sure. Just in the chat, maybe. We could create a space for recommendations, but there's no voting mechanism anymore. Uh, I'm okay with that, to be honest. But yeah, I guess if you've got something you want us to read, I'm taking recommendations until we get to that point in the podcast. I have a couple ideas for things that I would that I could pick. I've ordered a bunch of books recently. There's a new Stephen Pressfield one, by the way, that looks pretty great. Um, I have one. I have one that was recommended to me by somebody that I met in person. I've been doing the linking your thinking, the expert workshops or whatever, like series of talks there on like Bible study and Obsidian stuff like that. And one of the people in the linking your thinking community turns out they live in the same town as I do. So we met up at a local coffee shop recently and told me about how to meditate. A practical guide to making friends with your mind. Because I don't know if you've tried to read a book on meditation previously. I know I have, and all of them, with the exception of 10% Happier, have kind of been like dry academic textbook style, really boring. She said this one is different. I haven't actually looked at it yet though. So, how to make the best coffee at home. I could write that book, honestly. No offense, James Hoffman. Okay, Blake, I will ban you right now for suggesting a fiction book. Yeah, right after Clan of the Cave Bear, I'll get on that one. That's the best part about switching to Circle, by the way, is we don't get those random emails from people saying, "Hey, I have a fiction book. You should review it for your." No. Mm. Hey, I'm coming around on Sapiens. It's only a matter of time. Uh, maybe not 2 weeks, but whatever. We've gotten lots of good recommendations from books that we've read recently too. Your Brain at Work by Dr. David Rock. I bought that one because it was a suggestion from somewhere, and then I didn't. Neither of us really liked the future of analog, but he mentioned there's a book 24/6, but around the action items that we have. So I actually have that book, and it looks pretty decent. I don't know. I will. I'll hold off on picking one till we get rolling, but we probably should record a podcast today. Okay. By the way, I'm good time wise. I don't have anything after this, so but if you need to bug out, let me know. Oh, we gotta get this birthday show on the road. So, all right. Well, let's open up Audio Hijack here. I'm not going to install the update, but thanks for asking. Oh, for yours? Let's do, well, uh, why don't you clap when we count down? Okay. Yeah, that's cool too. All right. I mean, otherwise I could hit record and we could just line up the claps. That's the That's fair. All right. I got my note card, my fancy pen ready to go. The pen of the day, by the way, is the Sailor 1911 Royal Tangerine. I can't get this to focus. Darn, I thought I had an autofocus. This is the large one. It's an extremely orange pen, which is why I love it. And it is inked with uh, Robert Oster Fire on Fire, which is one of the best inks in existence. It's a very orange ink, but it has some really cool shading. Um, I'm blanking on the term. I'm a bad fountain pen nerd right now. What's that called when you have like the edges are darker? I know there's another term besides shading. No, feathering is like when you hit, yeah, the spider web sort of a thing. Yep. I don't know. Haven't had a pen in a while. That's true. That is true. I've gone more digital. Well, analog digital with the books. But yeah. Anyways, quit distracting me. We need to record this so Joe can get to the birthday. All right. Should I count down and then you're gonna drop a marker? All right. Three, two, one. It's a momentous day, Joe Bulig, because we are officially on Circle, thanks to all of your hard work and moving everything over. Awesome. Yeah, and by doing this, we have basically been able to clean a lot of things up. So the URL I think stays the same, right? It's bookworm.fm/membership if you want to join, and you can actually join the circle community without paying for the extra stuff. So just come make recommendations, join the chat, all that kind of stuff inside the community. There's also we've have added events. So when we do the live recordings, you don't just find out an hour before when Joe sends the tweet out. We usually pick the time at the end of the recordings and we put that on the calendar. Well, actually now there's a calendar event that you can RSVP to if you want. It's got the link to the YouTube live stream, which I think is pretty cool. And then there's also a couple of additional feeds. So we have the occasional sponsor for Bookworm now, which is awesome. And if you are a pro member, then you get access to a special section of that circle community, which has not only the book notes, but also some additional goodies like the wallpaper and the extra feeds. So when I say feeds, plural, because Joe committed to this. I created more work for him, but he's good with it, which we all need to thank him for. So there's the normal podcast, which you've been listening to, subscribed to for a very long time. There's also the pro version, which is ad free. And then there is the bootleg, which is basically the moment that we connect for the live calls on YouTube. Joe hits the button for like the backup recordings. He's going to take that audio. So all of our mistakes, all of our fighting with our gear, right? All of us, all of the pen chatter. Well, I don't know. I mean, one thing I think is kind of cool was kind of like this running joke between Blake and Carol and us in the live chat is the pen of the day thing, right? So we tend to talk about things that we know not everybody is going to care about, but when we see people in the chat, we'll sometimes talk about some or go nerdy, about some different things. I don't know. This is a nerdy podcast to begin with, but we get extra nerdy sometimes. We get a little bit silly sometimes. That is available also right after we record the live show. That's typically like a week before the actual show comes out. So if you want to get the episodes early, that would be another reason just to get the bootleg. But you can wait. No, you don't need to do anything, but if you want all the extra stuff, it's same price, $5 a month, $50 a year, and it's a great way to support the show. So thank you to everybody who has done that. But yeah, I'm excited that this is now in Circle. Circle is what I've been using for the faith-based productivity community, and I've used it for part-time YouTuber Academy and Ship 30 and stuff like that. It's just a great platform for connecting with people, and I'm excited to see you all over there. I'm a part of, I think, six different Circle communities at this point. So one of the things I like about Circle is you've got like the switcher on the sidebar, so you can jump back and forth between the different communities without ever having to leave that website. And there's a pretty great iOS app, probably Android app too. I think that's out now. I know that came after the iOS app, but which can give you access to all your different Circle communities. So yeah, thanks, Joe, for making the switch. All right. Let's talk about action items. You've got one here. How'd you do with your tech shutdown? Cool. So I had a similar action item to unplug on the Sabbath. And I think I mentioned last time my strategy for this was going to be to create a focus mode, a Sabbath focus mode, which I did do, and it does work well. The only annoying thing about it is that uh, my iPhone likes to make suggestions on other things that I should do with this Sabbath focus mode, and I don't want any of the suggestions. So maybe there's a way to turn off focus mode suggestions that I just haven't dove into settings to figure out. But it's working well. I just wish the additional stuff would go away because I have intentionally kept it simple. Thanks, Siri. I got this one. Yeah. So speaking of shortcuts, by the way, I need to point this out. I would be derelict in my duties of mentioning Obsidian every single episode if I did not do this. Uh, are you aware of this app? And I'm using air quotes here called Actions for Obsidian. So this is basically a a bridge between Obsidian and shortcuts. So it's made by this guy who also developed a community plugin, which adds the ability for these different callback URLs to be accessible in Obsidian via shortcuts. And then it adds 30 plus actions to shortcuts. So you can do things like take the output from a shortcut and insert it into a placeholder in your daily note. Or you can get the results from a data view table, or you can transfer all of your appointments from your calendar into your daily note at placeholders, things like that. It basically turns Obsidian into like an Apple native app with in terms of the support for shortcuts. And I am using this at a very, very low level, but it is really cool. And I feel like if you looked at this, you would probably really love it. It's on the Mac. I believe it's coming out for iOS soon. But right now it only works on the Mac. Yeah, it's on the Mac App Store, the website. If you hover over the iOS one, it actually changes to available soon. So he's still trying to figure out some of the sandboxing stuff on iOS. But if you use Obsidian on your Mac, this is pretty cool. It's got a couple different pricing tiers based, and you pick the one based on like how useful it is for you, which is kind of a cool pricing model. And it's got a 14-day free trial. It starts at $7.99 as a one-time purchase. But the URL is obsidian.actions.work. And it's pretty great. Has nothing to do with our action items though. So I will go back and report on my last action item, which was to check out Bookshop. I did. I didn't buy anything off of Bookshop. I don't think I'm gonna buy anything off of Bookshop. Well, I mean, full disclosure, we do share affiliate links to books that we talk about in Bookworm. So if you are going to buy a book that we recommend, and you click on the link in the show notes, that takes you to Amazon, and we get a small kickback from that. So that is another way you can support the show. And if you don't like affiliate links, now you know, and you can avoid them. Obviously, so I'm not going to use it for any of the bookworm stuff unless we just made that decision together that we don't care about that extra affiliate income, and we're just going to support the local bookstore because it's the right thing to do. I would be okay with that. You could talk me into that, but it's just not as simple. It's not as efficient. I buy so many books. I don't want to have to go there first every time and then go somewhere else when they don't have what I want. So they didn't have the book that we're covering today. And I don't really blame them for that. This one I hadn't really heard of until Martin recommended it. So this isn't like a everybody's got this one sort of a deal. But just the fact that they may or may not have what I'm looking for, that's additional time, additional complexity. I'm not going to do that. Maybe I should, but I'm not. I can tell you, I know myself. I'm not going to do that. So I don't know. I'm not going to say other people shouldn't use it. Go ahead. Like I love the premise, but um, yeah, I looked at the website, poked around on it. They didn't have the book for today, so I'm like, well, that's a bummer, but I'll try it again. Went back and looked at it again, and I could feel my motivation waning every single time I went to the website. So, did you check it out? Yeah. I think it's easy to get excited about some of these action items in the books that we read. And the more distance you get from them, the less important they are. This one wasn't really that important to begin with. And so, let's just say this one failed. Yeah, fair enough. All right, let's talk about today's book. Today's book, which I foreshadowed as not available on Bookshop, is Master Your Motivation by Susan Fowler. And this was a recommendation from Martin. He, I think, is on the chat today. So, yeah, this will. I'd love to hear your insights as we go here, Martin. Um, this is a pretty short book, broken down into three parts and an introduction. I actually don't mind that. I think I had a kind of moment of clarity when I was looking at this book because it is pretty small, and the subtitle is Three Scientific Truths for Achieving Your Goals. So you could take the approach of like, oh, well, they obviously just landed on the three things and then they developed this whole message around this because it was a convenient number. However, there's actually a lot of science you can tell has gone into this, and I did not think that that was a superficial thing for simplicity of organization. And by the time I got done with this book, I was like, you know what? Maybe I need to reconsider my stance on three-part books. Because we tend to write that off right at the beginning. And to be fair, a lot of the books that we have read don't need to be three different sections. It is a bit of a stretch. But I feel like this one's pretty clean. So there's the introduction, which is why motivation science matters. Then part one is the truth about motivation. Part two is motivation is a skill. And then part three, what is stopping you? And there's different models associated with specifically part one and part two. So part three is basically everything else. And I feel like it's structured pretty well. What was your first impression of this book? And even more granular, what about the topic of motivation? When I picked this one, were you excited by it, or did you find yourself resisting this topic? All right. Um, what uh, what did you think uh, overall, just at the beginning here? Like, which way do you find yourself being pulled? Yeah. Sure. Sure. Okay. Well, I guess I picked this book because I was interested in the topic of motivation, but didn't have anything specific that I was looking to change. There wasn't a reason that I wanted to do a book on motivation, just other than it was an interesting topic to me because we've talked about willpower and a lot of like the creative stuff is there's this imagery of conquering the resistance and things like that. And I've kind of long believed that motivation is more important than willpower or maybe even discipline. Like it can override that certain situations, but I didn't have like a specific situation where I was like, I want to apply this. Just the topic was interesting to me at the time, and this was a recommendation that looked pretty good. So we picked it up, and let's jump in here. The first part we're going to talk about is just the introduction. And one of the things that I liked about this introduction is just the way that the stage is set for this discussion on motivation. The introduction has a subtitle of Why Motivation Science Matters. And there's two big things here that kind of stood out to me. Number one, she directly addresses Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm not sure what you think about Maslow's hierarchy. Do you think like, oh, this makes a ton of sense and this is the way the world works, or do you think it's a bunch of baloney? I don't know what. Well, she basically says the first in the nicest way I've ever heard. She says that Maslow's hierarchy of needs has never been empirically proven, which that statement kind of was shocking to me when I heard that because I know people who take Maslow's hierarchy as like this is gospel truth on the way that humans are wired. And I've always thought it was a little bit, I don't know, it just never really sat right with me whenever I looked at that. Like you look at it and it kind of makes sense, but I never was able to buy into it 100% and I never really understood why. And so I felt validated by that statement. And then she kind of talks about the thing that is more important in her words. And I think I would side with her on this, and that is the self determination theory, which is the foundation of motivation science. Now, that term self determination, basically, what that means is that you are the captain of your own ship and you have the ability to chart your own course and you can become the type of person that you want to be and create the life that you want to live. And that is something that I have actually brought up many, many times on this podcast. We've talked about it a lot, but it stems for me from the family business. My dad started a software company and developed a whole bunch of products based off of a whole bunch of research on the topic of emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, things like that. Self determination is a big part of that. So for a long time, I worked with the family business and we sold educational assessment skill building products to schools. And the populations that we worked with were special education primarily or at risk. And self determination specifically is the thing that can turn an at risk kid's life around because they typically don't come from the best scenario and firmly entrenched in victim thinking. And as long as they continue to think that way, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their environment doesn't create an opportunity for them to succeed. And I want to to iterate here that that doesn't mean that I recognize that like bad things happen to people and sometimes it's not your fault. But when it happens, like you can accept that you have the power to change it or not, and it's much more freeing to embrace this self-determination theory. So self-determination, I totally understand how this can be the foundation for motivation, and I really enjoyed, selfishly, I guess, seeing it here. Uh, what do you think about this? Yeah, and also just as like the this is kind of the launching off point for the rest of the book, obviously on motivation. Do you see the connection there, and what do you think about the case that she's making here? What's your mental state after this point in the book? Are you all right? I'm excited. Let's make this happen, or are you like hesitant as you walk into the next section? Skeptic. All right, gotcha. Well, I was definitely excited by this. Yep. Yeah. Mhm. Sure. Well, I mean, that's a great place to go into the next section. So the actual meat of the book starts with part one, which is the truth about motivation. And there are 5 chapters here. I don't want to go through all 5 of these chapters. I've kind of grouped the outline here under the 3 different parts. But I will outline the chapters here real briefly in this first part. So, chapter one is 3 scientific truths. Chapter two is motivation isn't what you think. And then chapters three through five get into the 3 truths. So, chapter three is create choice. Chapter four, create connection. Chapter five, create competence. Okay. So, that actually is the first thing I wanted to discuss here is I feel like in chapter one, she makes a very good case for the way that she has constructed or deconstructed maybe the whole idea of motivation. She mentions that we have a natural yearning to thrive, and I like that word thrive. That's not the word I was expecting, but it was the one that instantly resonated with me. And then she says that to thrive, we need three things. We need choice, we need connection, and we need competence. And in the back of my mind, the whole time I'm hearing her talk about these three things, I'm thinking about the burnout inventory that we took and how these things are directly connected there, although I couldn't map them live here for you. It is clear to me that these things, and whether you have these or not have these, this is directly or inversely maybe connected to the amount of burnout that you feel. And burnout essentially is the complete absence of motivation. You can't summon the energy to act, and that's how she defines it. Actually, is the energy to act. All right. So that being said, there are these three things that we need: choice, connection, and competence. I think we should talk about these a little bit. So when you create choice, uh, your energy is increased. When you don't, your energy is diminished. When you create connection, the energy is there that you need to act, but when you don't, your energy is compromised. It's kind of like sabotaged. When you need to create competence. When you don't have competence, then your energy is blocked. Like it's there, but it can't manifest. And when you create choice, connection, and competence, you can flourish. But when these things are eroded, you languish. I will pause there and just get your thoughts on those things as a whole, and then maybe we can dive into these a little bit deeper, component by component. Yeah, well, let's kind of break these down one by one. So the first one is choice, right? And she points out that when you think you can't have something, it ends up becoming the only thing you can think about. And how, again, with all of these, she would say we have this innate need for these things, right? But when she's talking about choice, she's talking about we need to perceive that we are the ones in charge of our own actions, that we have options. And to create choice, there's different things you can do. You can perceive you have choices. You can recognize and feel you have options within your boundaries. You can feel that you're in control of your actions. But the thing that really stood out to me from this section is that even if you don't have freedom, you can still experience choice. So this is entirely based on your perspective. Now, I have felt this way before, where it's like I don't have any options. I have to remain committed to this choice that I made. And reading through this chapter, I was able to identify different scenarios throughout the course of my life where it's like, you know what? I was totally looking at that from the wrong perspective. I felt trapped and I felt my motivation being diminished, right? I've been in that place where it's really, really hard just to get up and go to work in the morning. And I realized after reading this chapter that nothing about my situation would have needed to change in order for me to feel completely different about it. And that can make you feel uncomfortable again, depending on whether you buy into the self determination theory or not, right? But when you admit that it's your fault, that's actually freeing because it means that you are the problem, but you're also the solution. The power lies within you to change your world, and I think that's a pretty powerful idea. What about you? Do you feel currently like you have choice, or maybe you pick a scenario, from your previous experience, and maybe how this played out a little bit different? Yep. Well, the relationship aspect of it leads into the connection part, which this is interesting to me. And I would actually defend your lack of motivation to go help somebody after reading this because I had to kind of wrestle through this part. But connection is authentically caring about others and feeling cared for by them. And I think it is okay to say, I don't have the relationship that I should have with this person. Now, you can do what you will with that, right? And you can do things on your end maybe to fix that relationship. I'm thinking of a situation from the day job where there was somebody that I work with very closely now, and just the way things went down at the beginning of my work there for 6 9 months, there were a lot of changes being pushed through, and I was the new guy, and basically the entire team kind of assumed that all of these, in their view, negative changes that were happening were being pushed through by Mike. And to this day, there are still attitudes that I need to work on. But this one person specifically, they had that because of the atmosphere of the day job, and then all of a sudden, I'm working very closely with her. She's on my team, right? And we've been working closely together now just for a couple of months, but the way that we work is totally different. And essentially, what she found out was what the narrative that was being told through the grapevine at the company was not reflective of me as an individual. Um, and it's kind of been completely different to the point where, that narrative is still being spun. And in our connect yesterday, she's telling me that she heard stuff from people, and I don't want to know who it was. I don't need to know who it is individually, but she's like, just so you know, this is still going on. And she's getting like visibly upset that people are thinking about me that way. And I share that story just because it became clear to me when we had that conversation how much the connection and the relationship had improved, and how differently the way that we work and the quality of the work that we're able to do together has changed. And is that my fault that it's still that way with the rest of the people? No, not at all. But I'm going to do what I can to improve it still. I'm not going to be like, well, you guys are the ones who need to change your thinking about things. It'd be nice if I had a little bit more support there. Right? I'm asking for that. Maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. We'll see. But I'm not gonna let it stop me. But also I'm not going to, because the other approach that I would typically take is, well, this is my fault and it's completely on me to change this. No, I have choice. I have options, right? So for me, I'm starting to see how these things kind of fit together. And overall, what it's done is it's helped me feel more confident in my abilities. Maybe that is the third one here too. And I don't want to just talk through this whole section on my own. I want to hear what you have to say too. But the competence piece is the being able to experience progress, gain mastery, feel confident and resilient. Well, what I realized was that I have grown a lot in my abilities and my skills. When I first came into this position, I didn't think I could do it. I've learned a lot though, and I realized I'm actually really, really good at what I do. I looked at some charts of like the revenue for the organization, and it's actually gone like off a cliff since January of last year. And you just look at that one, you're like, holy cow, this company's in big trouble. But then you look at the profit one and you see in the last 6 months, we're just like crushing it, right? So, hey, good job, me. I am actually good at this. And so like I was viewing myself as not very good at my job because of a lack of connection, which I have no control over. I can't change the story that people tell in their heads. I'll pick away at it here and there when I can, but I realized that that was creating like this limiting belief in my mind, and I was starting to feel depressed, and that's really a big reason why I was so burnt out. It's like nothing I do here matters. Nobody cares. Right? I had to get over that. Mm. Yeah, that's the main point with chapter two. So I kind of doing this out of order. So we talked about choice, connection, and competence already, but that's three, four, and five. Now going back to number two, when it comes to motivation, the quality of your energy matters. So when you create choice, connection, and competence, that generates this high quality motivation, which leads to optimal motivation. And this is the point where she talks about how willpower and discipline are red flags because they're a warning of suboptimal motivation. And I specifically chose this point after we talked about choice, connection, and competence because I think it's really easy to see that she's right here. And all the studies about willpower and discipline, it doesn't mean that those things should be ignored. But I do think that, at least myself, I was tending to view willpower and discipline, the Roy Baumeister studies, and all that kind of stuff. I was relying on that stuff too much. And it's easy to see after going through chapters three, four, and five how if you really can dial in choice, connection, and competence, you can create that feeling where you get up in the morning and you're excited to do what you have to do. And it doesn't matter how much willpower or discipline you have, that perspective is going to make the difference. You know, you compare that to the burned out stage where you're dreading going into the office and you look at your output at the end of the day, absolutely you're going to get more work done and better work done when you have the motivation, regardless of whether you wear the same thing every day or you are trying to decide what to have for breakfast. I mean, those are the types of things that all those little productivity tips and the life hacks, which really just kind of drive me nuts now. It's like, got to preserve your willpower, got to make sure that you have it for the decisions that really matter. Well, no, if you're excited about the decisions that you have to make, then it doesn't really matter. It's kind of my takeaway from this. If you have limited motivation, if you haven't ever considered choice, connection, and competence, then yeah, probably you do need to make sure that you manage that stuff because you don't have much to go around. Yep. So you're talking about uh, discipline, and I think another word that goes along with that is like diligence. And I'm going to share something in the chat here. Toby, well, all of our kids are homeschooled and we do classical conversations. Part of classical conversations is you have to learn Latin. Okay. Yeah. So Toby posted this thing in the faith-based productivity community about he did a word study for diligence. And what he found was that the English word for diligence is a very different definition than the Latin root that it's kind of based off of. And the Latin root, essentially, I'm paraphrasing this, it's all about love, right? So when we think about diligence, we think about I have to do this thing that I don't want to do, right? Or discipline. It's like I'm going to show up and do the hard thing. And I realized as I was reading through this post that Toby put together, if it's based out of love, then really like do what you love. There is some truth to that, but you have to create the motivation to love what you do. It's not you just find the fun thing and then you do that the rest of your life, but you find the thing that you have to do and you create the motivation through the three levers that she's talking about here: choice, connection, and competence. And then you bring that perspective to the thing that you have to do. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. He gets into some different Bible verses that talk about diligence. And if you read those through the lens of like it's being motivated by love, it totally changes the definition. You know, and you can pick, yeah, you can pick and choose obviously individual things and do a big Hebrew and Greek word studies and kind of make those mean what you want, which you got to be careful when you're doing that sort of an interpretation of a religious text. But I think it's a pretty cool idea. Yep. And then complementary to that is the Latin root for the word passion, which is pati, which means to suffer, right? So passion isn't do what you love, but what do you care enough about that you're willing to go through some things? In other words, what do you have enough motivation for to show up and do? Yeah, but that's the whole point, I think, leading into part two here. I think this is a great place to transition because part two is motivation is a skill. So all of this stuff that we're talking about in terms of your perspective and bringing the motivation to what you need to do, you have the ability to get better at this. And this one is broken down into three different chapters. So, chapter six, identify your outlook. Chapter seven, shift your outlook. Chapter eight, reflect on your outlook. And she's got a very simple diagram here of how these things are kind of like a flywheel. They feed each other. Let's start with identify your outlook. She shares the spectrum of motivation model here. Do you remember this? Yep. Yeah, I like this a lot. You want to try to explain this to kind of walk through like what this is visually? Yep. Yeah, exactly. And the point that she makes around this is that you're always motivated. The question is, what kind of motivation do you have? And to add a little bit of additional context to this, there is an X and Y axis to this. So from the point in the lower left, that is low quality. And then whether you go up or to the right, it's a scale of high quality. And the two axes are on the X axis on the bottom, you've got psychological needs. And on the Y axis, so going up, you have self regulation. So there's this kind of curve with these different types of motivation. Disinterested is way in the bottom. And then there's external, and that is all based off of like the carrot and the stick analogy. And she kind of dispels that throughout the rest of this book and saying that's not a good way to do it. Although I think a lot of businesses and organizations still view that as like the way to motivate people. And then the imposed one is the one that's interesting to me. That's the third one, and you're getting kind of like right in the middle of the graph then, but you're still a little bit below that line like you were talking about. And that's the one that I think it's easy to slip into. You just assume these things and you don't ever question them, and then they kind of drive a whole bunch of behavior. And so I realized recently that I had fallen into this one. Specifically, I didn't want to let people down. So I've come pretty far in terms of my needing to be a people pleaser, but I realized that this is kind of the motivation that gets me to go back to that is they have this expectation, whether that's real or it's imagined. I attach to that, and then I kind of feel like it doesn't matter what sort of circumstances I'm in, what kind of obstacles I'm facing, I will produce the result that they expect. And I kind of had this moment of clarity when I was looking at this. It's like, huh, so you mean I don't have to just assume that? Well, what does that look like then? It means that I have permission to say those expectations I am not going to be in alignment with. Going back to the first section, like I have choice now. Even if I'm not going to take that choice, it is at least a choice, right? So I think there's a lot of people who maybe you find yourself in a job and you feel like I can't get out of this job, but I don't like it, right? Well, if you are able to actually flip that switch and say, you know what, I could actually go get another job. I could, I don't want to, right? It's a lot of work. I don't know what's out there. That's scary. Like these are all legit resistance and legitimate things that you have to take into consideration. But if you can overcome all of that and realize that you do have the option, that kind of changes everything else. And that's the thing that gets you from that low level motivation to a higher level of motivation. And that's ultimately what we're after. That's what this whole part is about. You have to, first of all, identify where you're at, because you always need to know where you are before you can know where you are going. Okay. So you kind of have to buy into this spectrum of motivation model at the beginning, which is why I brought it up. But then from there, the second step is to shift your outlook. Okay, this is where I am. I'm going to create choice, connection, and competence as I attempt to shift from one of these lower levels of motivation to a higher level of motivation. And then there are different things that you can do in order to get to that. I've got a couple of action items from this book. Actually, I think all of them come from chapter 7. Just looking through my outline here. Yeah. So number one is to make a list of what I value. And there are different things that you can use to figure that out. One of the things she suggests is how do I spend my time and my money, right? Or thinking through where are the discrepancies between my espoused values and my developed values. I think that's a really cool way of saying like everyone has this idea of the type of person that they want to be, the values that drive their actions. I'm this type of person. Well, do your actions actually back that up? Because if not, there's a disconnect there and you have to figure that out. But then ultimately, I mean, I love this whole discussion of values and core values. You know, we've got core values for our family. This is a big thing for me, personal mission statement, all that kind of stuff. But I feel like she frames it really well in this chapter about how not all of your beliefs are values, but all your values are beliefs. All right. So We'll unpack that. Not everything that you think is going to be a primary value. It's not going to be a driver of your actions and motivations, but all of your values will drive those actions and the things that you do. And ultimately, all of those values are personal choices. So there's no right or wrong way to do this, but you got to figure out what these are for yourself. Me too. Absolutely. And the framing of the reflect section, which I think is really powerful, is that when you've created choice, you can initiate more. When you've created connection, you can develop more. When you've created competence, you can build more. And just that framing, I really appreciate. Basically, what she's saying is that the minute that you start to make any sort of progress, that's just the beginning. There's a snowball effect here, but it's also not systematic. It's not formulaic. It's not just do these three things. Like you have to figure out for yourself what progress looks like in these different areas. But I think it is really powerful at this point. The reflect piece is very important because you have to recognize your success and your ability. Going all the way back to self determination, it's like, see, you could do it, even if it's just a little bit. And then it's okay. So you've done this now. Let's do it on a bigger scale. And when reflecting, she talks about focusing on the why, the goal of asking why, mindfulness. There's that word again. Uh, but one thing that is interesting, she calls out here, is that mindfulness isn't much harder than mindlessness. And that's kind of challenging if you're going to sit and wrestle with that. So you're saying that all this trouble I have with mindfulness meditation, uh, it's actually not that much harder for me to just drift from thing to thing and scroll through the endless feeds. I'm kind of speaking generically now, although mindfulness meditation is something that I have struggled with. I kind of think that my reason I've kind of struggled with that is I have a different form of that in the prayer practice that I've established. So I just don't see the need for that. I do think I would be beneficial if I was able to cultivate it and make it a discipline, but the motivation isn't there. However, looking at this, maybe I need to go back and revisit that. That is not an action item. The thing I'm calling out here is that we tend to just default to a lot of our choices. It's kind of our brain's efficiency mechanism. 90% of what we do is based off of habit. Well, we'd never really thought about it. We've never really tried to deconstruct those things and figure out ways that we can create motivation to either do the right thing or not do the wrong thing. Again, deciding for yourself what those are, uh, that's our own fault. And the fact that we haven't been mindful about the or intentional about those choices, he's basically saying there's no excuse here. It's really not that hard. You just have to be aware of it. You have to be aware of your feelings. You have to be aware of the reasons behind your motivations, and you have to be able to recognize new perspectives and try them out, which kind of gets into the whole idea of like the mental models and just the way that you think about things, which obviously I'm that's a topic that I'm really excited about and interested in. But she kind of sets this up in a way that I feel like there's more options. Going back to choice, right? I feel like I have some possibilities available to me with this now that I didn't feel previously, if that makes sense. And that's really the whole power of this last step, because again, this feeds the next step. All right. So when you reflect, you're actually looking at where you are again, and has that changed from previously? And if it has, or if it hasn't, why? And what are you going to do about it again? It's this perpetuating cycle. And you can either direct it and it can be positive, or you can just default to it and it can be negative. It's okay. Exactly. uh, that actually begins to get into this last section. So let's go to part 3 next, which is what is stopping you. And this is basically where she disarms a lot of the excuses, starting with chapter 9, I can't shift. Chapter 10, beware fatal distractions. Chapter 11 is work hazards. And then chapter 12 is can people change? All right. So chapter 9, I can't shift. This is all about limiting beliefs and knowing yourself. And this is kind of where she talks about journaling providing an opportunity for mindfulness. And this is another version of talking to yourself. Right. But she says that you can't thrive when you carry a backpack full of junk food motivation. At that point, it's like, oh, she's reading my mail. So there's a lot in this that is going to force you to take a hard look at yourself. And if you bought into the self-determination theory, you're comfortable with that. If not, I can see why you might just disconnect at this point altogether. Chapter 10, be wearing fatal distractions. This is kind of where she talks about how the world is energy, and the real question is, what are you doing with it? So we can just get sucked up into the busyness, or we can be intentional and direct our intention where we want it to go. We can be in power of it or not. But the last part in well, chapter 11 is work hazards, and this is where she encourages you to look beyond the incentives, and working for the wrong reasons will ultimately diminish your results. She talks about connection at work, which I think is really important, and she mentions that connection is eroded when you experience unfairness. So that is really something for me to be uh, to be considering with working with the team. I don't have an action item associated with that, but that was one of those things like, hey, kind of look for this, right? See if you can recognize when it's happening and do what you can to avoid it. But the last part, I think, is the really cool part. We're all constantly changing. So yes, people can change. Everyone goes through predictable stages of concern during a change. So it always is going to feel weird at first, and you don't have to feel bad about that. But then there are questions that you can ask yourself, which kind of get you thinking about things through the right lens. Again, I love me some questions. So what choices do I have? What meaning can I make from all of this? What can I learn? Those are just some examples of questions. I'm sure there's lots of other ones that you could use, but what I really like about these questions is it's all based on what am I going to make of the situation that I am in. It's not how am I going to change the situation? How am I going to change my circumstances? Although what choices maybe is a little bit in that direction, but then like what meaning can I make from all of this? All of this doesn't change, but the meaning that I glean from it, that absolutely can change. Or what can I learn from this season or this failure that I find myself in the middle of? Well, I can take something from that, something positive, and I can use that next time. So I think that's a really cool way to end the book. I think that's a rhetorical question, to be honest, because you're supposed to. Well, yeah, of course, people can change. Because the next question then is, well, why don't they? Yep. I'm here. Sorry, my video shut off for some reason. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about in this, or should we wrap it up there? All right. Well, let's go into action items then. I have two of them with this book. The first one I mentioned already, and that is to make a list of what I value. But the other one comes from that same chapter. I don't think I mentioned this one, and that is to craft my own credo. Maybe I did talk about this. The word credo, I don't really like. She used some examples. This is just like a rallying cry for yourself personally. I've got the core values, I've got the life theme. Uh, I want to, though, create kind of like a manifesto. I think I talked about this previously and I've done some work on it, but this gave me inspiration to go back and revisit it. And I don't know if this is going to be for me personally because or something a little bit larger, because one of the things that I've been thinking about is like faith-based productivity is my brand, and what does that even mean? Right. So I actually have this idea to create like a faith-based productivity manifesto. I think that that is going to be very much a personal manifesto, but I might make it public and share it with people also. So I'm going to commit to working on this. I don't know if it's going to be finished by next time, but I'm going to do some work on my manifesto slash credo. How about you? All right. So how do I summarize your action item? Prove the book. Okay. All right. Style and rating. All right, so I picked this book. I will go first, and I will share that I really enjoyed this book. I don't really know what I was expecting, other than I wanted something good about motivation. I feel like this book delivered. So thank you, Martin, for the the recommendation. Um, it's a short book. I mean, it's 150 pages ish, but it's pretty big type. It's pretty visual. I didn't track the time that I spent reading this one, but felt like it was I could crank through it pretty quickly. Did you feel the same way? Yep. Yep. I will say I was nervous when I got the book and looked at the title, Three Scientific Truths for Achieving Your Goals. You kind of pointed out like goals, Mike. You good with this? There really wasn't a whole lot around goal setting, and maybe I would, if I was writing this, pick a different subtitle. But I understand why she did that. That's the term that everybody is pretty familiar with, and really, she's talking about the motivation to follow through and do the things that are important. Right. So this is a perfect complement to all of the books that we've done on habits, like Atomic Habits and Tiny Habits specifically. I feel this book is a good complement to those two. Tiny Habits kind of talks a little bit about some of this stuff, but I feel like Susan Fowler does a great job of addressing the topic directly and doing it succinctly. And like I mentioned, there's obviously a lot of science and research that has gone into this that is evident in the way that it's written. There's a lot of personal stories of people who have worked through this stuff, which honestly, towards the end, I found myself kind of skipping through some of those. But I don't think there's a whole lot of fluff in this book. So pleasantly surprised by it. I actually like the three parts. I feel like they're packaged really, really well. Especially once I got to the end of this book, felt like, that was really well written. And I think this is one that just about everybody should read. I don't have any other books on motivation to compare it to. I know somebody mentioned Drive by Daniel Pink in the chat, but I have not read that one. And from what I understand, talks about these same concepts, but has some different terms for it. I also know that one's quite a bit longer than this one. So I don't know. I feel like you really can't go wrong if you're interested in this topic at all. This is a pretty great read. How do I rate this book? I don't know, because I feel like it's really good. I feel very inspired walking away from it. I feel like all of this stuff is instantly applicable to me. Um, you do have to kind of wrestle through the fact that if I'm just now coming to the topic of motivation, is this book really that life-changing? I don't have a track record to support that one way or the other. But that's really the only thing negative I can say about it. So I think that's going to keep me from rating it 5 stars, but I am going to rate it 4.5. I really, I have trouble picturing a book about motivation that I would have enjoyed more than this one. And again, I kind of went into it with a side eye, like, I'm interested, but I'm not sure this is exactly what I'm looking for. And what I got was something I really enjoyed and I think is going to be very largely beneficial and very generalizable to just about anybody in the bookworm audience. Even if you feel like you don't struggle with motivation, I feel like there's a very clear framework here for you to figure out how to make it even better. And so it's not going to give you, these are the things that you need to do. You have to manufacture that yourself, but it gives you the understanding of the levers that you can pull. And I think it's a really good book. So thanks, Martin, for the recommendation. All right. So let's put Master Your Motivation on the shelf. What's next, Joe? All right. After that, I do have to pick one. Okay. Well, this is what I'm gonna pick. This is one that Toby turned me on to. It was a recommendation by Ali Abdal. And Ali Abdal, I find his book recommendations, I either absolutely love them or I completely disagree with them. Usually I can tell right from the video that he's recommending it. This one I feel like this one I have a pretty good feeling about. This one was recommended to me by Ali Abdal via Toby, who watched the video, and then I went back and looked at it. And I'm like, yeah, this one sounds pretty cool. The Pathless Path by Paul Millard, imagining a new story for work and life. So we're inviting some existential crisis into our lives, maybe, but this one I've heard some good things about, and I'm gonna drag you along. Well, it should be entertaining at the very least. Well, I am interested in this one. I think I'm at the point where maybe you could call it a midlife crisis, right? But I'm just reevaluating where am I at in my life? Where do I want the rest of what do I want the rest of my life to be about? I mean, that's part of my mission, and all the personal retreat stuff kind of contributes to that as well. But it's just been something that I've been thinking a lot about, and this book looks pretty legit. So uh, I want to dig into it, and hopefully it helps a few other folks along the way. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to everybody who attended the live recordings. Reminder, if you are in the Bookworm Club, which you totally should be, there are events which show you when these recordings are going to happen and links to the YouTube live pages so you can join in the chat. If you want to be extra awesome, you can sign up to support the club and become a pro member. $5 a month, $50 a year. You get access to the booknote files that I create, the MindNode files. So I've got both the PDFs and the editable MindNode files. You get the Bookworm wallpaper, and you get actually three different feeds for the show. You got the normal one, you get the pro show, which is the ad-free version, and then the bootleg, which gets uploaded after the live recording. So you get it a little bit early, and you get to hear all of the mistakes that Joe and I make and how stupid we sound. So if you want to make fun of us, that is false. But if you want to make fun of us, that's the one to listen to. Cool. All right. Got one marker dropped. Awesome. I was pleasantly surprised by that one. Thanks, Martin, for the recommendation. I, I kind of was too. But it was good though. Very helpful. Indeed. It is a great. Yep, exactly. All right, you want to pick a new date? Let's see. That would be Easter week, right? Okay. Yeah. So is 2 o'clock on the 6th work? Okay. I have a meeting at 1:30 before that. So that's the earliest that I could do it on that Thursday, but we could do it when we could do it. I could do Wednesday at 1 o'clock if that works for you. Could also do Good Friday if you wanted to do it. You're probably in the building before Good Friday service anyways. Okay. Wednesday the 5th at 1 p.m. Central Time. You heard it here first. Ready. Now I got to get cranking on that book. Thanks everybody. All right. Cool.